What happens when one of the biggest names in royalty walks onto a morning show set only to turn a friendly interview into a full-blown disaster? It only took 33 seconds of confrontation for everything to fall apart completely. Michael Strahan was all smiles that morning. He had his coffee ready, his notes prepared, and the studio audience was buzzing with excitement. This was supposed to be a conversation about charity work, about positive change, about looking forward. Everyone in the building knew this guest was a big deal. The producers had spent weeks coordinating this appearance. The cameras were positioned perfectly. The lighting was adjusted just right. Everything was set for what should have been a pleasant, uplifting segment to start everyone's day off on a high note. But from the moment Meghan Markle walked onto that stage, something felt different. The energy shifted. You could see it in the way she carried herself, the way she looked around the studio like she was inspecting it, judging whether it met her standards. Michael stood up to greet her, extending his hand with that warm, genuine smile he's known for. She took it, but barely. It was one of those handshakes that feels cold, distant, like she was doing him a favor just by being there. "Welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you here," Michael said, his voice full of enthusiasm. He gestured to the chair across from him, trying to make her feel comfortable. She sat down without much of a response, adjusting her outfit, looking at her nails, glancing at the cameras with an expression that seemed almost bored. The audience didn't know what to make of it. They had come ready to cheer, ready to celebrate, but the vibe was already off. Michael, being the professional he is, pushed forward. "So, let's dive right in. You've been working on some incredible charitable initiatives. Tell us what's been inspiring you lately." A simple question, an easy one, the kind of softball opening that any guest would appreciate. But instead of answering with grace or enthusiasm, Meghan let out a small sigh, like the question itself was beneath her. "Well, Michael," she started, and there was something in the way she said his name that felt condescending. "I think the real question is, why are we still asking such surface-level questions when there are so many deeper issues at play?" The studio went quiet. You could feel the confusion rippling through the audience. Michael's smile faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly. He's dealt with difficult guests before. He knows how to navigate tricky moments. "Absolutely, we can go deeper," he said, keeping his tone friendly and open. "What issues would you like to talk about?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs, and looked at him with this expression of barely concealed irritation. "I think what people don't understand is that when you've lived the life I've lived, when you've experienced what I've experienced, regular interview questions just feel trivial. I'm not here to talk about surface things. I'm here to discuss real change, real impact." Michael nodded, still trying to keep things on track. "And that's exactly what we want to hear about. Your platform has given you an incredible opportunity to make that impact. Let's talk about the specific projects you're working on." But she wasn't having it. Instead of answering his question, she went off on a tangent about how the media never understands her intentions, how everything gets twisted, how she's constantly misrepresented. The whole time, Michael sat there listening, waiting for an opening to bring the conversation back to something the audience could connect with. "I appreciate you sharing that," he said when she finally paused. "But our viewers at home, they're interested in learning about the work you're doing. Can you tell us about the organizations you're supporting?" She looked at him like he had just asked the most offensive question in the world. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightened, and then she said something that made everyone in that studio freeze. "You know what, Michael? This is exactly the problem. You sit here in your comfortable chair, with your comfortable job, asking comfortable questions, and you have no idea what it's like to actually fight for something meaningful. You have no concept of the struggles that people like me face every single day." The audience gasped. Actual gasps. People looked at each other in shock. The camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. The producers in the control room were probably panicking, trying to figure out how to salvage this disaster. Michael, to his credit, kept his cool. His voice remained steady, professional, respectful. I think that's a bit unfair. We're all here trying to have a constructive conversation. I'm asking questions that I think our audience wants to know the answers to. But Meghan was just getting started. She leaned forward, her voice getting sharper, more aggressive. Your audience doesn't want to know anything real. They want sound bites. They want headlines. They want to consume content and move on with their day without actually thinking about anything that matters. And you feed into that. You perpetuate that cycle. You could see Michael's expression change. The smile was completely gone now. He wasn't angry, but he was clearly done playing nice with someone who had come onto his show just to insult him and everyone watching. "Hold on a second," he said, his voice firmer now. "You came here as a guest on this show. I've been nothing but respectful to you. I've given you a platform to share your message. And instead of taking that opportunity, you're sitting here attacking me and attacking our viewers. That's not okay." She scoffed. Actually scoffed. Like a teenager who just got told they can't go to a party. "Oh, here we go. I say something real, something honest, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. This is exactly what happens every single time. People can't handle the truth." "The truth?" Michael's eyebrows went up. "The truth is that you're being incredibly disrespectful right now. I don't know what you thought this interview was going to be, but this isn't it." The tension in that studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Audience members were sitting on the edge of their seats, not because they were excited, but because they were witnessing something uncomfortable, something that felt like it could explode at any second. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be lectured by someone who clearly doesn't understand anything about what I'm trying to accomplish." Michael remained seated, looking up at her with an expression of complete disbelief. "Nobody's lecturing you. I'm trying to have a conversation, which is literally the entire point of you being here." "A conversation?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You call this a conversation? You asking me shallow questions and expecting me to perform like some kind of trained animal for your cameras? No, thank you." The producers were definitely losing their minds at this point. This wasn't just a difficult interview. This was a complete meltdown happening live in front of cameras and a studio audience. Michael stood up now too, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that showed he was taking control of the situation. "I think we need to take a break," he said, looking toward the cameras, trying to find a graceful exit from this nightmare. But Meghan wasn't done. Not even close. "A break? Why? So you can regroup and figure out how to make me look bad? So you can edit this footage and spin it however you want?" "Nobody's trying to make you look bad," Michael said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You're doing that all by yourself." That comment hit like a bomb. The audience couldn't help it. A few people let out quiet oohs under their breath. It was the kind of comeback that was perfectly deserved, perfectly timed, and perfectly devastating. Meghan's face went red. You could see the anger boiling over. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am?" And there it was. The line that nobody should ever say, especially not on live television. The line that makes everyone listening immediately lose any sympathy they might have had. Michael crossed his arms, his expression now one of complete bewilderment. "Yes, I know exactly who you are. You're a guest on my show who has spent the last several minutes insulting me, insulting our audience, and refusing to engage in a respectful conversation. That's who you are right now." "Unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head. "This is exactly why I stopped doing interviews in the first place. People like you, people in the media, you're all the same. You pretend to care. You pretend to want real dialogue, but the second someone challenges you, The second someone speaks truth to power, you shut them down. Michael let out a long breath, the kind of breath you let out when you've reached the absolute limit of your patience. Speaking truth to power? You came onto a morning talk show. I asked you about your charity work. You responded by attacking me and everyone watching. That's not speaking truth to power. That's just being rude. The audience started clapping. Slowly at first, then building. They were clapping for Michael, for standing up for himself, for not letting this guest walk all over him. And that just made Meghan even more furious. Of course they're clapping for you, she spat out. Of course they're on your side. This is your show, your audience, your territory. I never stood a chance of being treated fairly here. You had every chance, Michael shot back. You had the chance to come here, talk about your work, connect with people, and leave everyone feeling inspired. Instead, you chose to be hostile from the moment you sat down. She grabbed her purse from beside the chair, slinging it over her shoulder in one angry motion. I'm not going to stand here and be disrespected like this. Then don't, Michael said simply. The door's right there. The entire studio held its breath. Was she actually going to leave? Was this really happening? A guest walking off the set in the middle of an interview? Meghan looked around the studio, like she was waiting for someone to stop her, to apologize, to beg her to stay. But nobody did. The producers stayed silent. The audience stayed silent. Michael just stood there, waiting to see what she would do. Fine, she finally said, her voice dripping with contempt. I'll leave. But trust me, people are going to hear about this. They're going to know exactly what kind of show you run here, what kind of host you really are. Michael didn't flinch. They're watching right now. They can decide for themselves. That might have been the most brutal line of the entire exchange. Because he was right. Everyone was watching. Everyone was seeing exactly what was happening, exactly who was being reasonable and who was being impossible. Meghan turned on her heel and started walking toward the exit, but she couldn't resist one final parting shot. She stopped, turned back around, and pointed at Michael. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice shaking with anger. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Michael just shook his head, a sad smile on his face. I think I have a pretty good idea at this point. And with that, she stormed off the set. The sound of her heels clicking against the floor echoed through the silent studio. Everyone watched her go, stunned by what they had just witnessed. The camera stayed on Michael, who slowly sat back down in his chair, running a hand over his face, like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. For a moment, nobody knew what to do. The show was supposed to keep going. There were more segments planned. But how do you follow something like that? How do you go from a guest walking off your set to a cooking segment or a weather report? Michael looked directly into the camera, his expression serious but calm. Well, he said, that was unexpected. I want to apologize to everyone watching at home. That's not the kind of interview we planned, and it's certainly not the kind of conversation we hope to have. We always try to treat our guests with respect and give them a platform to share their message. But respect has to go both ways. The audience started clapping again, this time louder, more sustained. They were showing their support for him, for how he handled an impossible situation with grace and dignity. We're going to take a quick break, Michael continued, and when we come back, we've got some great stuff planned for you. Don't go anywhere. The cameras cut away, and the studio erupted. Audience members were talking amongst themselves. Crew members were rushing around trying to figure out what to do next, and Michael just sat there, still processing what had happened. One of the producers rushed over to him, headset on, clipboard in hand, looking absolutely frazzled. Are you okay? She asked. Michael nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. That was wild. Wild doesn't even begin to cover it, the producer said. We've never had anything like that happen before. Neither have I, Michael admitted. "I've interviewed hundreds of people. Thousands, maybe. I've never had someone come on the show just to pick a fight." Another crew member chimed in. "You handled it perfectly, though. You didn't lose your cool. You didn't get nasty. You just held your ground." Michael shrugged. "What else was I supposed to do? Let her walk all over me? Insult our viewers? No way. This show is about bringing people together, making them feel good, starting their day off right. I'm not going to let anyone, I don't care who they are, come in here and turn it into something ugly." The makeup artist came over to touch up his face before they went back on air. "You're trending already," she said, looking at her phone. "People are posting about it everywhere." Michael groaned. "Of course they are." No, it's good," she assured him. "Everyone's on your side. They're saying you were professional, that you stood up for yourself, that she was completely out of line." He seemed relieved by that, but also exhausted. Dealing with conflict like that, especially when it's so public and so unexpected, takes a lot out of you. The stage manager started counting down. Back in 5, 4, 3. Michael straightened up, put his professional smile back on, and when the cameras came back on, he transitioned smoothly into the next segment like nothing had happened. Because that's what professionals do. They don't let one difficult moment derail the entire show. They adapt. They move forward. They keep going. But while the show continued, while Michael talked to his next guest and laughed at jokes and kept things light and fun, everyone in that building knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Something that would be talked about for a long time. In the control room, the director was already reviewing the footage, marking the key moments, knowing that this was going to be dissected and analyzed and replayed over and over again. The entire confrontation, from that first cold handshake to the final angry exit, was captured on camera in stunning detail. What made it so remarkable wasn't just the drama of it all. It was the contrast. On one side, you had Michael Strahan, a man known for his warmth, his humor, his ability to make guests feel comfortable. A man who had built his entire career on being likable and professional. And on the other side, you had someone who seemed determined to be difficult, who appeared to view the entire interview as beneath her, who couldn't or wouldn't engage in a normal, respectful conversation. The audience members who were there that day would tell their friends and family about it for weeks. "You won't believe what I saw," they'd say. "I was sitting right there when it happened." Because being present for a moment like that, a moment of real, unscripted conflict, is something people remember. Back on set, Michael was wrapping up an interview with a chef who had been teaching him how to make some kind of pasta dish. He was laughing, joking around, seeming completely at ease. You would never know that just 20 minutes earlier, he had been in the middle of one of the most uncomfortable television moments of his career. That's the mark of a true professional. The ability to compartmentalize, to not let one bad experience ruin everything else. Michael understood that the show was bigger than any one guest, bigger than any one moment. His job was to be there for the audience, to give them entertainment and information and a reason to start their day with a smile. During the next commercial break, several members of the audience approached the stage, wanting to tell Michael how much they appreciated how he handled the situation. One woman said, "Thank you for standing up for yourself. We see so many hosts just let guests walk all over them, and it's refreshing to see someone who won't tolerate disrespect." Michael thanked her, but downplayed his own role. "I just tried to keep things civil. That's all any of us can do, right?" But it was more than that, and everyone knew it. He had maintained his dignity and his professionalism even when he was being actively insulted. He had given his guest multiple chances to course correct, multiple opportunities to turn the interview into something positive. And when it became clear that wasn't going to happen, he didn't explode, didn't get petty, didn't sink to her level. He simply stood his ground and let her make her own. choice about whether to stay or go. The rest of the show went smoothly. There were no more dramatic exits, no more confrontations. Just good television, the kind that Good Morning America had built its reputation on. But nobody watching could stop thinking about what had happened earlier. It was the kind of television moment that cuts through the noise, that makes people pay attention, that reminds everyone that live television is unpredictable and anything can happen. As the show came to a close, Michael did his usual sign-off, thanking everyone for watching, reminding them to tune in tomorrow, wishing them a great day. And then the cameras stopped rolling, and he could finally relax. He walked off the set, loosening his tie, and one of the producers caught up with him. "That was one for the books," she said. Michael laughed, but it was a tired laugh. "Yeah, definitely not how I expected this morning to go." "How did you stay so calm?" she asked. "I would have lost it." "Yeah." Thought about it for a moment. "I don't know. I guess I just kept reminding myself that getting angry wouldn't help anything. And honestly, once she started going off like that, I knew the best thing I could do was stay calm and let her show everyone who she really is." And that's exactly what happened. By staying composed, by refusing to engage in a screaming match, by treating the situation with the seriousness it deserved without making it worse, Michael had come out of the whole thing looking better than ever. Meanwhile, his guest had revealed herself to be exactly the kind of person nobody wants to work with. Difficult, entitled, and utterly unable to handle a simple interview without turning it into a confrontation. The story spread quickly. Within hours, clips of the interview were circulating online. People were breaking down every moment, every exchange, every facial expression. Media analysts were discussing what it meant, what it said about celebrity culture, what it revealed about the challenges of live television. But at the heart of all that analysis was a simple truth that everyone could see clearly. One person had come to do a job, to have a conversation, to connect with an audience. The other person had come looking for a fight. And when you approach any situation with hostility and contempt, when you refuse to show basic respect to the people around you, eventually it's going to blow up in your face. That's exactly what happened on Good Morning America that day. A guest walked onto the set, thinking she could control the narrative, thinking she could say whatever she wanted without consequences, thinking her status and her fame would shield her from any pushback. But she was wrong. Because no matter who you are, no matter what you've accomplished, there are still basic rules of human decency that apply. And when you break those rules, when you treat people badly for no reason, eventually someone is going to stand up and say, enough. Michael Strahan was that someone, and the way he handled it, with professionalism and dignity and just the right amount of firmness, showed everyone watching exactly what it means to be a real host, a real professional, and a real person who refuses to be disrespected. The interview that was supposed to be about charity and positive change ended up being about something entirely different. It became a lesson in how to handle difficult people, how to maintain your composure under pressure, and how to stand up for yourself without losing your cool. Those are valuable lessons, and millions of people got to witness them in real time, unfiltered and unscripted. As Michael headed to his dressing room to change and decompress, he knew this moment would follow him for a while. People would ask him about it in interviews, bring it up at events, want to know what he was thinking during those tense minutes. And he'd tell them the truth, that he was just trying to do his job, trying to have a normal conversation, and was genuinely shocked when it turned into something so confrontational. But he'd also tell them that he has no regrets about how he handled it. Because at the end of the day, you have to respect yourself enough to not let people treat you badly. You have to value yourself and your audience enough to maintain standards. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it would be easier to just smile and nod and let it slide. That's what made this moment so powerful, so memorable, so worth discussing. It wasn't just drama for drama's sake. It was a real person standing up for real principles in a real moment of conflict. And in a world where so much of what we see on television feels manufactured and scripted, there was something refreshing about witnessing something so genuine, even if it was genuinely uncomfortable. The lights in the studio were being turned off now. The crew was packing up equipment, resetting the set for tomorrow's show. Another day of live television was complete, but this one would be remembered long after most episodes were forgotten. This one had given people something to talk about, something to think about, something to learn from. And Michael, walking out of the building into the bright morning sunlight, could hold his head high, knowing he had handled an impossible situation in the best way possible. He had been tested, and he had passed. He had been disrespected, and he had stood his ground. He had been pushed, and he had pushed back, not with anger or cruelty, but with truth and dignity. That's all anyone can really do when faced with someone determined to create conflict. You can't control how other people behave. You can't force someone to be reasonable or respectful, but you can control yourself. You can choose to respond with grace. You can choose to maintain your standards. You can choose to be the better person, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And on that morning, in that studio, in front of those cameras and that audience, Michael Strahan made all the right choices. He showed millions of people what it looks like to handle yourself well under pressure. He demonstrated that you can be kind without being a pushover, that you can be professional without being passive, that you can stand up for yourself without tearing someone else down. The interview ended with a guest storming off the set, but in a deeper sense, it ended with a victory for decency, for professionalism, for treating people with respect and expecting that respect in return. It ended with a reminder that no matter who you are, or where you come from, or what you've accomplished, basic human courtesy still matters. And when you forget that, when you decide you're above it, when you treat others as beneath you, you're going to find yourself walking off a stage, alone and angry, while everyone else just shakes their head and wonders what went wrong.